I'm going to start with you, Ausi, Yoliswa, to pick up further, however you'd like to reflect back.
I think something that is not maybe too obvious is I actually have spent enough time in the business fraternity myself. So the huge immersion in social justice is part of the transformative journey I referred to when I began. And so immediately, I think I take it for granted that we all here understand that there's different meanings to land, and already it's coming up in different ways. My colleagues have already emphasized some of that. So there's, firstly, it's the meaning of land must be expanded beyond the definition maybe that in business circles is usually confined in, which is the productivist notions. And my friend Mbuso actually honored me and came here. He's recently written the book, These Potatoes Look Like Humans, which I implore anyone who's interested in the land question to really read. But it expands this definition to the spiritual dimension, which is seldom recognized. The reason why I say this is that, so to be dispossessed, because it's very easy in these circles to be like, oh, it's assets, you can get other forms of assets, whatever. Like I've sat in a call where someone's like, you want land, we can give it back, there's land free. You know, I'm like, to be dispossessed, it's really to be stripped, you know. I would say even stripped naked, you know. And so most of us that are engaging with this work and in this space, the pain is actually deepening, and people are wondering why you're being radicalized. And I'll say this because I think there's some people in the audience that might be struggling with this. I do come from a staunch religious background back home, but I'm like, no, this is an ancestral call. I'm so restless. I cry when I think about dispossession. We recently hosted at the Nelson Mandela Foundation, where I'm based at the moment, the Cape Town group. They work on urban land injustice. There was a point in that film where I'm like, this is apartheid. We're still in an apartheid state, you know. So to be without the land or to be dispossessed, it's placed you in a haunted space. And I think until this work is resolved, a lot of us, I don't think we'll really experience freedom. That's just on a personal and a connecting with everything that's happened. But I do want to come back to the space I spent a lot of my working time at, that when we do speak about it in this productivist notion and connecting it to injustice, is that I recently did an exercise, and post-apartheid, you can see the housing prices and the farmland prices that they really did increase. So you are without the land. So the racialized wealth inequality is directly connected to dispossession. That correlation is not, you don't even need scholarly evidence. It's just, you can work that out, that you are without the land, they have the land, they've sold it or they've kept it, the market price has increased. Therefore, value accumulation by default is still racialized, is in the white landowners who have, per statistics, the majority of the land here still, because we have not done the work of redistribution. So that for me quickly brings me to the question of wealth, that you cannot separate land from a wealth conversation. It's almost impossible. You start with land, but you have to quickly move to wealth and other forms of accumulation. In other jurisdictions, we are seeing a very fancy use of land now as a financial asset. It's entering the financial markets like equities. It's very complicated work, but it's causing new forms of dispossessions. We haven't done that work in South Africa to see what that looks like, but this dispossession is present as well. What I want to close in so that I can give my peers space is, someone mentioned, I think Pedro and Cynthia's panel, was that we are co-opted in this paradigm. You know, because the minute you speak about doing anything radical on land justice, you see financial stakeholders, like they shape up. If you just Google any parliamentary meetings and see who makes the most submissions on any interventions on land, it's the economic stakeholders. They sit up. But what I would love to emphasize, which is my dilemma as well, as somebody who sometimes wears this economic hat, is I do know that the most pensioners and the most depositors here are black people, because we're the majority. So what I'm saying is there will be a cost to us too, because we've been co-opted, if we want to actually reorder this. So there will be disorder if we want to reorder towards order.
Yeah. That was tight. Yvonne?
Okay, ma'am. I'll start with the word igaga. So this happens a lot in my family, that people will say things and not define them.
Yeah.
But the manner in which they are said, you know whether or not this is polite,
Yes.
or this is a critique, or this is... So igaga, maybe other people know the definition or the origin of the word, but I knew for a fact when anyone in my family, and it was mostly the woman, who said, I knew that they were appalled. And I knew that it was a critique. And there's I love leaning back to what, my people used to say, because I used to always ask my grandmother, why are things happening the way they are happening in the farm? And all she would say is one line and one line only, amagaga ayadagasa, which means that white people do as they please. So I had to then interpret that for myself, what it means. She just would not explain it. And it was again linked to, I'm going now to the idea of humiliation, the idea of unfreedom. But those are, so the critique, I don't have a concept like most of what I read of farm workers just being exploited. Yes, they are exploited, but there are ways in which they insist on their being, which for me makes me see them outside of the realm of exploitation, but as people. And I want to return to something that was mentioned, I think by Gogo Kekelezo, and I think Nokolo mentioned it, the idea of inkaba, the umbilical cord. That I also learned from farm workers. This idea of when, after some time, when after a baby is born, and then the inkaba, the umbilical cord, detaches from the baby's body, it is treated with so much respect. It is sacred, it is precious, and it is then placed in the ground. And this is to mark oneness with the place. This is to mark a place to return to, because we always move around. This often marks ties with a longer lineage. This often marks a place where people choose to be buried. This often marks being and existence in a place. This also often marks conceptions of home and belonging. This is what, to me, the idea of inkaba is. So there are moments at which it was very clear from the conversation that there is this unfreedom, that there is this humiliation, that there is this racism, this racial exploitation and racial domination, but also there's also a sense how people relate to the land and how people mark oneness with the land. And are not, at that moment, are not thinking of themselves as exploited farm workers, but as people that belong to the land. They would often say, when looking at the land that is fallen, that is not used, but these white people are killing this land. And they also had a conception of land which is very regenerative. Not this thing like, but this idea that there is a oneness that we establish. outside of this commodification of land and this privatization of land, this idea that land is an object that belongs to one, therefore it's someone's territory.